a bicycle pump, and a rubber tank. That is what stopped Hitler's entire Panzer division from reaching Normandy on D-Day. The Nazi war machine had the most feared armored force in human history, Tiger tanks. Panzer divisions that had crushed Poland in weeks rolled through France in days, pushed deep into Soviet territory across thousands of miles of open ground, and a group of artists, actors, and sound engineers from New York, armed with inflatable rubber toys and a record player, made those Panzer divisions stand completely still, while the real invasion happened somewhere else. The rubber tank cost about $50 to inflate. The Panzer division it stopped was worth hundreds of millions, and the Nazi high command never knew they were looking at balloons. Level 1. The army that didn't exist. By 1944, everyone knew the Allied invasion of Europe was coming. Hitler knew it. His generals knew it. Every senior officer in the Nazi high command was watching the English Channel and asking the same question. Where will they land? That question was worth more than any single battle. Because wherever the Allies chose to land, the Germans needed their best armored divisions waiting there. Get it right? Crush the invasion on the beach. Push them back into the sea. End the war on Germany's terms. Get it wrong? And the most powerful military force ever assembled would pour onto European soil with nothing to stop it. Hitler was convinced the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, the shortest crossing point, the most logical choice, the place any rational military planner would choose. And someone on the Allied side realized that certainty was a weapon. If Hitler believed the invasion was coming at Pas-de-Calais, and if that belief could be reinforced, he would keep his Panzer divisions there, away from Normandy, where the real invasion was actually going to happen. But reinforcing that belief required something almost impossible. Hitler needed to see a massive Allied army preparing to cross at Pas-de-Calais. The problem? No such army existed. So the Allies built one out of rubber. Level 2. The Ghost Army. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. 1,100 men. On paper, they were a standard military unit. In reality, they were the strangest collection of people ever assembled by any military in human history. Artists from the Art Students League of New York, actors and set designers from Broadway, sound engineers and radio operators recruited specifically for their ability to create convincing fictions. Their weapons were not guns. They were rubber. The Ghost Army, as they became known, operated with a collection of inflatable decoys that could replicate virtually every piece of military equipment the Allied forces used. Inflatable Sherman tanks. Deflated, they folded down small enough to fit in a duffel bag. Inflated, they stood full size, visible from aircraft, visible from a distance, convincing enough to fool aerial reconnaissance photography. Inflatable artillery pieces. Inflatable landing craft positioned along rivers and coastlines. Inflatable trucks and jeeps arranged in convoy formations across open fields. And around those rubber shapes, painted tire tracks in the mud, painted exhaust marks on the grass, fake oil stains on the ground beneath the rubber engines. Details that only matter if someone is looking very closely. And Nazi reconnaissance aircraft, flying at altitude, taking photographs, were not looking closely enough. But the rubber was only one layer of the deception. Level 3. The sounds of an army. A rubber tank is convincing from the air, but it is silent. A real armored division makes noise that carries for miles. Tank engines, the grinding of steel tracks on road surfaces, the rumble of artillery being moved into position, the sounds of thousands of men and hundreds of vehicles moving through an area. Silence where there should be noise is its own kind of alarm. So the Ghost Army brought speakers. Half-ton sound trucks, vehicles carrying enormous speaker systems capable of projecting recorded audio across 15 miles of open countryside. They had recorded the actual sounds of real armored divisions moving, real tank engines starting, real convoys rolling through towns, real soldiers setting up camps, and they played those recordings on repeat. Night after night, across the fields of southeastern England where the fake army was positioned. The sounds of a massive armored force preparing for invasion, drifting across the channel on the night air. Think about a German listening post across the water. You are hearing it. Tank engines, hundreds of them. The unmistakable sound of a massive armored force. The sounds that you have heard before, in Poland, in France, right before an Allied assault. You report what you hear. Your commanders confirm it with aerial photographs of the tanks in the fields. Everything matches. A massive Allied army, right where Hitler expected it to be, preparing to cross at Pas-de-Calais, except the tanks are made of rubber, and the engines are a gramophone record.
Level 4, the radio war. But the Ghost Army was not finished. Sound and rubber were convincing, but Nazi intelligence was sophisticated. They intercepted radio communications. They tracked signal patterns. They built intelligence pictures from radio traffic as much as from visual observation. A massive army generates massive amounts of radio traffic. Unit commanders talking to each other. Supply requests. Medical reports. Maintenance updates. The constant background noise of a large military organization coordinating across multiple frequencies. An army with no radio traffic is not an army, it is a ghost. So the Ghost Army's radio operators, some of the most skilled in the entire Allied force, went to work. They created fake radio networks. Dozens of operators, each one assigned a specific fictional unit. Each one broadcasting traffic that matched the signature of a real armored division. Logistics requests for fuel and ammunition, personnel reports, equipment maintenance schedule, all of it fake, all of it consistent with the existence of a massive army preparing for a major amphibious assault. And the Nazi signals intelligence units intercepting all of it were building a picture of exactly what the Ghost Army wanted to see. Honestly, stop and think about it. The Ghost Army was fighting a war that existed entirely in the enemy's mind. Every piece of evidence the Nazis gathered, visual, audio, electronic, pointed to the same conclusion. A massive Allied army, Pas-de-Calais, imminent invasion, and every single piece of that evidence was completely invented by artists, actors, sound engineers with rubber and a record player. If you were a Nazi intelligence officer right now, looking at aerial photographs, listening to intercepted radio traffic, hearing the engine sounds drifting across the channel, would you believe it? Because some of the sharpest military minds in Germany did. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the real Allied invasion hit the beaches of Normandy. 156,000 troops, 5,000 ships, 13,000 aircraft, the largest amphibious assault in human history. And the Nazi armored divisions that could have destroyed it on the beach were sitting at Pas-de-Calais, waiting for an army made of rubber. Here is the detail that makes this story genuinely staggering. Even after the Normandy landings began, even as it became clear that the real invasion was happening, Hitler refused to move his Panzer divisions because the Ghost Army was still transmitting, still broadcasting, still making the sounds of a massive army preparing to cross. Hitler was convinced that Normandy was a feint, a distraction, that the real invasion, the big one, was still coming at Pas-de-Calais. He held his best armored divisions in place for weeks after D-Day, weeks in which the real Allied forces consolidated their beachhead, brought in reinforcements, pushed inland, made their position unbreakable. By the time Hitler realized he had been deceived, it was too late. The war in Western Europe was effectively over. And here is the question for the comments. Was the Ghost Army the most important military unit in World War II? More valuable than any tank division or air force because they held Hitler's best armor in place during the most critical hours of the entire war? Or does the credit belong to D-Day itself? And the Ghost Army was just a supporting trick that would have meant nothing without the real invasion. Pick your side. Defend it below. The Nazi Panzer divisions were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The most feared armored force in history, held completely still by 1,000 artists and actors, rubber tanks, and a bicycle pump. The Ghost Army never fired a single shot in combat. They won their battles entirely inside the enemy's mind. And the greatest military deception in history started with someone inflating a balloon.